November 15th, 1923, Berlin, Germany. A 43-year-old schoolteacher named Anna Eisenmenger walks into a bakery with a canvas bag full of banknotes. The bag is heavy, it contains 100 billion marks, her entire life savings. 3 years ago, that money was enough to buy a house. Today, it is not enough to buy a single loaf of bread. She doesn't cry. She has been watching this happen for months. The numbers on the notes kept getting bigger. 1 million, 10 million, 1 billion, 100 billion. The zeros multiplied so fast that the government stopped counting and simply started stamping new denominations on top of old ones. The money was still paper, the paper was still printed, but whatever the paper meant had quietly disappeared. Anna walks out of the bakery empty-handed. Germany's Weimar Republic had just completed the most destructive hyperinflation in modern history. A currency that had taken decades to build was destroyed in less than 2 years. Not by war, not by invasion, by a government that printed money to pay its debts and couldn't stop once it started. I've been studying this for months, the Reichsbank's original records, the inflation data, the exact sequence of decisions that turned a debt problem into a civilizational catastrophe. And what I found genuinely disturbed me. Because between 2020 and 2022, the United States Federal Reserve created more new money than it had in its entire 107-year history combined. $5 trillion in 24 months. The mechanism the Fed used is not identical to the Reichsbank's printing press, but the underlying logic, using newly created money to cover debts a government cannot otherwise service, is the same logic, updated for the 21st century, running at a scale that would have been unimaginable to the officials who destroyed the mark in 1923. Stay with me. Here is what most people get wrong about the Weimar hyperinflation. The popular story is simple. Germany lost World War I, the victors imposed brutal reparations at Versailles, Germany couldn't pay, so it printed money, inflation followed, end of story. That version is not wrong, but it is missing the mechanism, the specific financial architecture that turned a debt problem into a catastrophe that wiped out an entire generation's savings in less than 2 years. Because that mechanism, the precise sequence of decisions that made the collapse inevitable, is not unique to Germany in 1923. It has run in every major currency crisis in history, and it is running again right now. Let me show you exactly how it worked. Germany entered World War I in 1914 with a deliberate financial strategy. Rather than raising taxes to fund the war, which would have been politically unpopular and economically disruptive, the German government chose to borrow. War bonds were issued. Citizens were encouraged to invest in Germany's future victory. The Reichsbank suspended the gold convertibility of the mark, freeing it to print currency in whatever quantities the war demanded. The logic was straightforward. Germany would win the war quickly. The conquered territories would pay reparations. The debts would be serviced from the spoils of victory. The mark would be restored to gold backing. Everything would return to normal. Germany didn't win. It lost. And in November 1918, it lost with a debt load that had multiplied its money supply by approximately 8 times since 1914. The reparations imposed at Versailles in 1919, 132 billion gold marks, roughly equivalent to $400 billion in today's terms, were not the cause of the hyperinflation. They were the trigger that exposed a financial system that had already been fundamentally compromised. Here is the critical part, the part that the textbook version almost always skips. In 1921 and 1922, Germany faced a choice: honor the reparations payments in hard currency, gold or foreign exchange, which it genuinely did not have in sufficient quantities, or default, which would trigger foreign intervention and potentially occupation, or print marks, use them to buy foreign currency in the open market and use that foreign currency to make the payments. Germany chose the third option. The Reichsbank began printing marks at an accelerating pace to purchase foreign exchange. But here is the mathematical trap that this decision created. Every time Germany printed more marks to buy foreign currency, the mark fell in value on the exchange markets. As the mark fell, Germany needed to print even more marks to buy the same amount of foreign currency. Each round of printing made the exchange rate worse. Each worse exchange rate required more printing. The spiral had no natural floor. By 1923, the Reichsbank was operating its printing presses 24 hours a day. Paper currency was being produced faster than it could be counted. Workers were paid twice daily because prices rose so fast that morning wages were worth significantly less by afternoon. Anna Eisenmenger's 100 billion marks, a sum that would have been incomprehensible in 1919, was genuinely insufficient to buy bread. In November 1923, the German government introduced the Rentenmark, a new currency backed by land values rather than gold, and the hyperinflation stopped almost overnight. The monetary system was stabilized, but the damage was permanent. The middle class, whose savings had been denominated in marks, was wiped out completely. The political consequences, a population that had lost everything, that trusted neither institutions nor currency, that was searching for someone to blame, would take 10 years to fully materialize. But they did materialize in ways that changed the world. Now, here is the United States in 2020. I want you to watch what I'm about to describe with the same precision I used to trace Germany's collapse, because the parallel is not a metaphor, it is a mechanism, and the mechanism is running. In March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic triggered the fastest economic contraction in American history. Markets collapsed, unemployment spiked. The government needed to spend trillions of dollars in stimulus, relief payments, business support, and expanded unemployment benefits. But the government did not raise taxes to fund this spending. It borrowed. And the Federal Reserve, to ensure that borrowing remained affordable, did something unprecedented in its 107-year history. It began buying US Treasury bonds with newly created money at a scale never previously attempted. Between March 2020 and March 2022, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet expanded from $4.1 trillion to $9 trillion, nearly $5 trillion in new money created electronically, used to purchase government debt and mortgage-backed securities. The stated purpose was to keep interest rates low, to ensure credit remained available, to prevent a financial crisis from compounding the economic crisis. The mechanism is not identical to the Reichsbank's printing press. The Fed does not literally print currency. It creates digital reserves that flow through the banking system. But the underlying logic, a government with debts it cannot service through taxation alone, using its central bank to monetize those debts through money creation, is structurally the same. Here is the critical part, and this is the part that most financial commentary consistently underweights. The Reichsbank's printing did not cause immediate hyperinflation. It caused gradual inflation first. From 1919 to 1921, German prices rose significantly, but not catastrophically. Many German businesses actually benefited from the early inflation. Their debts were being eroded in real terms while their assets held value. The crisis did not feel like a crisis in its early stages. It felt like an inconvenience. The catastrophic phase arrived when confidence in the currency broke, when enough holders of marks simultaneously decided that the mark's future purchasing power was uncertain enough to justify spending now rather than saving. That psychological shift from gradual inflation to a confidence break is not gradual, it is sudden, and once it begins, it is self-reinforcing. The United States is not Weimar Germany. The dollar is the world's reserve currency. The Federal Reserve has tools and credibility the Reichsbank never had. American institutions are deeper, more resilient, and more trusted. These differences are real. They matter enormously. They explain why the Fed's $5 trillion expansion produced significant inflation, peaking at 9.1% in June 2022, the highest in 40 years, rather than the catastrophic hyperinflation that destroyed the mark. But they do not change the underlying arithmetic. America's national debt is $36 trillion. Annual deficits are running at approximately $2 trillion per year. Interest payments have crossed $1 trillion annually, growing faster than any other category of federal spending. The Congressional Budget Office projects that debt service costs will consume an ever-increasing share of federal revenue for the foreseeable future. The Fed's quantitative easing, the $5 trillion expansion, did not resolve this debt problem. It deferred it. By buying Treasury bonds with newly created money, the Fed suppressed interest rates and made the debt temporarily serviceable. But the debt itself grew. And when the Fed began raising interest rates in 2022 to fight the inflation its own money creation had contributed to, it demonstrated the trap. Higher interest rates mean higher debt service costs on $36 trillion in outstanding obligations. Higher debt service costs mean larger deficits. Larger deficits mean more Treasury issuance. More Treasury issuance at elevated rates means even higher interest costs. The spiral runs in the same direction as the Reichsbank's exchange rate trap. Each step requires a more extreme version of the next step. Anna Eisenmenger's mistake was not stupidity. She did exactly what any rational saver does. She held the currency that her government and her central bank told her was sound. She trusted the institution. She kept the marks in the bag. The Reichsbank's officials were not villains. They were making the least bad choice available at each individual decision point. Print more marks or default on reparations and risk occupation. Each individual decision was defensible. The cumulative sequence was catastrophic. The Federal Reserve's officials are not villains either. They were choosing between a financial crisis in 2020 and the long-term consequences of unprecedented money creation. The choice to print was, in isolation, defensible. The cumulative consequence, a debt spiral that continues to expand, an interest burden that crowds out every other government priority, an inflation shock that eroded real wages for millions of Americans, is the same sequence that Reichsbank officials set in motion in 1919. The Weimar hyperinflation did not happen because Germans were uniquely foolish. It happened because a government with unsustainable debts, facing the choice between painful adjustment and money creation, chose money creation and then kept choosing it, until the choosing was no longer optional. America has not chosen hyperinflation. It may never. The dollar's reserve status, the depth of American capital markets, the credibility of American institutions, these are genuine buffers that Germany in 1923 did not have. But buffers are not immunity. They are time. The question that Anna Eisenmenger's empty bag keeps asking, the question that Weimar keeps asking, is not whether America's situation is identical to Germany's in 1923. It is whether the mechanism running underneath the numbers is the same mechanism, whether a government choosing money creation over painful fiscal adjustment repeatedly across administrations is running the same sequence that always ends the same way. The Reichsbank officials in 1921 would have told you their situation was different, that Germany had buffers, that the mark was sound, that the spiral would be managed before it became catastrophic. They were right that Germany was different. They were wrong that different meant safe. Subscribe if you want to keep following this, because I'm tracking the exact financial mechanisms connecting what the Reichsbank did in 1923 to what the Federal Reserve has been doing since 2020. And I want your argument in the comments. The Reichsbank printed to pay reparations it couldn't otherwise service. The Fed printed to fund stimulus it couldn't otherwise finance. Is the mechanism identical, or is the dollar's reserve currency status a genuine structural difference that breaks the sequence? Drop your answer below. The most compelling argument gets pinned.